Welcome to the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. I'm your host, Jacob Cooper, best-selling author of Life After Breath and the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. Today's guest is my dear friend and fellow Long Island native, Karen Garvey. Karen's a renowned intuitive author and luminary, and she's going to be, telling us some of her transformation from working in the left brain corporate world to how now she works as an intuitive channel and someone who delivers powerful wisdom and information in her workshops and lectures, as well as individual sessions with her clients. So you don't want to miss my wonderful conversation with Karen Garvey coming up next on the Wisdom Jacob's Ladder. Karen Garvey, welcome to the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. I know we go way back personally and professionally, but I don't know if my channel would be complete without your presence here today. So thank you for being my honored guest and fellow Long Island neighbor. And I've been
Yeah,
a great admirer of the work that you do and the global impact that you're having from similar necks of the woods that we have. But for my viewers who um, may not be familiar with you, could you just briefly share about the current work that you're doing? Because I know it's multi-layered and multifaceted, but
uh-huh.
kind of pinpoint a little bit about you and the work that you do. I think that would be very beneficial for people tuning in today.
Oh, okay, great. And it's always nice to spend time with you, always. Okay, so um, my path is uncommon in just that I began my life in academia and more of an intellectual, analytical role. Things changed dramatically. It's a long story, but on 9/11, the doorway opened to the possibility that consciousness is not connected to our bodies and that we can explore um, deep meaning in life and philosophical, eternal wisdom that is more beneficial to us in applying it in our lives to find happiness and to manage our past pain than I had found like experts to be able to do. So now I just use this conduit that I've kind of cleared out to allow my consciousness to attain information for audiences and for clients, and for books and for podcasts and so on, to bring information that could be of value to individuals and to groups to help
Mhm.
them cut through some of the limitations that we're taught in our human experience, many of the limitations that we're taught in being human.
Yeah, and I've certainly attended a lot of your local groups, a couple here on Long Island, and I love that you just allow yourself to just kind of get out of your own way, if you will, and allow this information to come forward. And it's beautiful because you hit on almost every issue and every point, and it's very it's just the right information that needs to come in, and I just know it's coming from a true and authentic place. But I know we have similar backgrounds in the sense that we both come from that kind of left brain
Yes,
academic
yes,
intellectual
yes,
kind of family where
yeah,
it's about the degree, it's about the job, it's about
yep.
the doing, so to speak. But how did that cycle break? Because that's very hard to all of a sudden go from that going and academic left brain lifestyle to now where you're just this embodiment of being and presence. How are you able to make that shift back in 2001, like you said, around the 9/11 time? Like what happened?
Yeah, what the perfect, I don't like to call it a perfect storm because that just implies that everything is really negative, but
Mm,
the perfect arrangement of circumstances did happen during 9/11 and the attack on the World Trade Center. And in the midst of all great tragedy and challenges, and even small ones, there's always something that can be found to be uplifting or to change us for the better. And in retrospect, that happened to be one of those moments that allowed me to leave the limitation of what we believe about our Earth experience, because I experienced what was happening at the World Trade Center in my mind's eye, even though I'm over an hour away from the setting. And that redirected basically my interpretation of everything in life, that I thought everything was linear and finite and predictable, or at least could be studied, through science. And to see that consciousness has no limitations and that it's not connected to our bodies, and to have it in such a prolific way that was validating to the point that it was irrefutable, just changed my perception of reality. And it made me really curious as to what have I been misknowing. And at that point in my life, I was still carrying a lot of pain from my own childhood. And I thought maybe I was misknowing that as well. And if I was observing my young children at the time and they seemed innately happy, why was I not innately happy? Maybe consciousness has something to do with that. And so I was embarrassed about what I was doing with consciousness, and having these experiences where it was traveling to places that seemed to have more value to me than the present. And so I just taught myself in isolation how to allow consciousness to roam to experiences. And because I didn't have a mentor or a teacher or read a book or anything like that, I wasn't taught someone else's limitations. So I wasn't taught that, you have to, stand up and face south and say a mantra and then do a clearing, or be afraid, or there's evil. I wasn't taught anything that prevented me from just following curiosity to see how far consciousness could go. And the beauty of that is that I got to experience things that I really never could have believed were possible until I was able to have them happen and then validate them, in the beginning, very scientifically, with log books and thousands of pieces of evidence. And then, I found that I could go to people's past lives. I could enter into their nocturnal dreams. I could enter places in history. I could enter the space of where the soul resides, that level of consciousness, before we select a body and have this earth physical manifestation. And as the evidence mounts, you have to stop doubting. You have to start having faith. You have to start having some trust and surrender, which ultimately I did. And when I got into that place of surrender, then the limitations were even less for me, since holding on to and needing to control and having a limitation in our expectations prevents us from free flowing. So the free flow comes readily and easily to me now, because I don't have any doubt about what's possible with consciousness anymore.
You trust in it. You
I
trust in the
trusted
flow.
it. I trusted it. I
Mm,
trusted it.
yeah. I mean, I'm wondering. There's a lot that you unloaded and said that I know I really took in. I know many of my viewers. But I'm wondering, what is it exactly about what we label as tragedy? Because it does seem like, whether that's grief, whether that's, something like, as magnitude as a 9/11, there's a lot of people who experience this tragedy, and they just have this experience of a metamorphosis of the
Right.
soul. Like, how does that kind of work for a lot of people, where things that you would feel should break someone in half, all of a sudden now, they've rebuilt their life from, no pun intended, ground zero? Like, what
Right.
is that
Yeah.
about? Is there
Yeah,
a is
I've
there
actually
Yeah.
put a lot of thought into this and witnessed a lot of different clients experience it. And what it is that the left brain has its use. It's our GPS. It helps us to be in linear time. It helps us navigate the space, because there is no time or space
Mm,
without a human body. So we need the left brain, but it's also, I think of it as like the sludge center for uncomfortable experiences and memories and beliefs. And so what happens when the magnitude of a tragic experience or a challenge gets so great, we need to almost, in order to move another day forward, we almost have to get out of that space and pop out of it and be free of it. It becomes, being left brain then becomes surreal.
mm,
And when you can't be in the left brain, that means you're forced over to the right brain. And the right brain is the conduit to freedom, love, exploration, optimism, creating, limitlessness, eternal knowledge, and wisdom. So it's the force that pushes us over into a space where we can now be open to the possibility of things that had been perhaps floating around us our whole lives, that we had just dismissed as being irrational or illogical. And suddenly, when we're in that right brain space, they seem to have a little bit more, you know, feeling of validness for us.
mm. In other words, in order to really thrive or survive, it requires another part of our being,
Yes, exactly,
to
exactly.
I love the analogy that I've heard Carolyn Mace bring up where she discusses the apartment buildings, and she says you could be on the first floor of the apartment and you could see a certain level of vision, but then you get up to the 10th or 15th floor, and now all of a sudden you see a lot
Yes,
more. And so
yes,
it seems like
yes,
that's what you're saying, where I
yes,
think a lot of it has to do with the vantage point that we come from, getting beyond the surface level of pain and agony of emotional attachments towards circumstances, being able to get into that higher mind or
yes,
the wise mind,
exactly.
whatever you label it as such.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I like the analogy of the apartment building, and the analogy that I often use is it's one of being on a plane, and as you're taking off, and you're looking at the buildings and the cars and the roads and the traffic lights, and then you go up, and all of a sudden you're looking at a place that could contain 100,000 people, and you start to think, you see little headlights, and you start to think about the lives of each person in every car and every building and every behind every window, and you just realize the magnitude of it all, and it just feels free. It feels freer to know that there's purpose in all of this happening and coinciding.
Mm. That's a beautiful segue for a topic that I had. And obviously, my channel, we don't necessarily get specific with everything going on, but I think right now there's a great deal of calamity. You can't deny that on one level. And I heard like two of my favorite spiritual teachers once giving a seminar, and one of the teachers says, I like this person because they walk the talk. I try my best, but I don't know if I do it to that degree. And for you, you're someone who I've followed throughout the years. Whenever there's something going on, whether that be an election, whatever it is, you're always congruent with what you say. It never, it may on one level, but at least on another level, you always keep equanimity. So
Yes,
with everything going on, like how do we find our center at this moment with so much, challenging us? And I think we had a lot with COVID and that was unique, but now it's like there's a storm and
yes,
everyone's uniquely impacted. And a lot of that has to do with, like myself, if you come from a certain background, culture, or religion, you may be more affected with ancestral trauma or just how it directly affects you. So, what could you speak to this moment? How, do we
one,
find
one
that
thing that
similar equanimity?
one
Yeah.
thing that I always remember is that if we look at the aggregate of where humanity is today versus the aggregate of the vibration that humanity was living at 200 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, the media would have you think otherwise, but we actually are in one of the more peaceful periods of
Mm,
history. And that is because enlightenment is a one-way road. And as each soul evolves and they have new incarnations, then the elevation of the human entire population is elevating.
mm,
No. So again, contrary to what the media is reporting, we are in a better space overall,
mm,
aggregately, than we ever have been in modern recorded history and probably in history, except maybe the earliest times of humanity. So when I keep, if I feel like I'm getting pulled into specifics that are happening that are so challenging and we feel inept or, helpless in them, I just keep remembering that in order for the elevation to continue, it's important that many people with what their particular level of awareness is or their view is, that they go lower before they can go higher. It's the
mm,
same as what we were talking about, the break from the left brain into the right brain. We tend to be complacent when we're just sort of not doing well or in sort of a bit of pain. But when our pain elevates, that's when we start to emerge into different possibilities, or we break a construct that has held on to us for thousands of years. So I recognize that, as difficult as these moments are, that they are playing into more people making that break, more
mm,
people saying, this is how I choose to live. This is what I value. I value all people. I value the planet. I value myself. I value our animal community, and living in harmony and living in honor, which is, I think, the highest connection that we can have to our eternal wisdom. It starts to emerge. And again, it's a one-way door. So we can't go back through that door.
Mm.
So when I was, not to tell you what my age is or anything, but this is definitely before your time.
Timeless, timeless, timeless.
But, when I was a little kid, one of the things that I would see on TV was, the whole women's movement, and,
Mhm,
it seemed like the world was on fire because literally there were these trash cans all over the place in these
mm,
bonfires where women were throwing their bras in it, and this is something that I was exposed to. And as a child, I didn't understand about, women's suppression or what this movement was. I just saw violence, and I didn't like what was happening. It just was, really off-putting to me as a
mhm,
kid, as a little kid. Now, in retrospect, I've come to recognize that that's a phenomenal metaphor for what we're talking about here.
mm,
I came to meet Gloria Steinem, who was at the head of, the women's movement in the
mm,
1970s. I've spent time with her. I've been over her home and had dinner with
mm.
her and so on.
Wow.
And I came to have a really deep appreciation for that she had or has an understanding that if the pendulum is over here and we really want, peace and equity here, we have to go all the way to an extreme in order to have it swing back into the middle. You can't go from here to here. It doesn't happen because you're going to wind
Mm,
up here. So you got to go all the way to the extreme, and then it'll swing into the middle. And that's exactly what happened. People are not per se burning bras, but women can wear bras or not, right? They can
mm.
do whatever they want at this point, largely thanks to that movement. And that, again, is just a metaphor for how women's rights advanced to some level. So this is true with every conflict that we see on the planet, is that it's important that there be an extreme representation of what doesn't work in order for us to find that place where we feel aligned in the middle of where it was to where we want it to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what's frustrating to so many people. We keep on saying this is 2023, this
Yes.
is the modern day era. How is this happening? I think a lot of people are upset because this does not represent who we are. These are
Yes.
extremes that are
Yep. Yeah.
broadcast in front of us, playing themselves out. But on average, this does not represent, who we really are. And I love that analogy because as a therapist, we talk a little bit about kind of like a slingshot where you go backwards sometimes in order to go forwards, or what we call clearing out the wound, where sometimes there's a wound, and in order for really heal, you don't ignore it, you go to it. It hurts a little bit, but then long term,
Mhm.
there's gain.
Yes. Yes.
So,
It's a really good point. It's a very
you
good
know,
point.
and we do
Very.
that a lot with trauma work, particularly because as a society now more than ever, we just try to avoid everything, and that's how things exacerbate, grow, really by going towards the source of our pain. We find the solutions and the healing. So,
Yes.
so
And
yeah,
again, you have to get to a level where the pain is personal and it's intimate in order to reevaluate what you value, right? And sometimes it's things or places that we value more than people, and letting go of our addiction in being obsessed with the material world, with objects and places and stuff and land. This is something that it's not a soulful behavior. And when we let go of those attachments, that's when we all start to see the things that matter, which is living in honor with one another and ourselves and the planet.
amen. I certainly hope we get to that level. Um, yeah,
Well, the
no,
good news is I do see that the enlightenment process, our energy right now is we're in an accelerated period of enlightenment. So things are happening more rapidly, and that gives me hope. I don't know that we'll be living with world peace in my lifetime, but I do feel like the idea of world peace is more tenable now than it was, 120 years ago.
mm,
And that's hopeful. And if we take our personal energy, your energy, my energy, and anybody watching, and we take our energy and we put it toward that vision, then we're inviting the path to open up more quickly because what you focus on will expand.
mhm. No, absolutely. And I know certainly you, I, everyone else is one of one, but we have a lot of commonality within all of us. And I'm wondering, is it possible that you and I were just on this path and we had what we had, and no one else has it? I don't think so. I think a lot of
Yeah,
people have inklings, but why is it that some people just don't listen to these things, don't follow on this stuff? Like, what is getting in the way of people shifting, making that change? Like, I know that's probably a multitude, but how do we have more Karen Garveys on the planet? It's like, how do we make this happen? Because it seems like there's a lot of pushes and just nudges going on, but people seem
right.
to ignore a lot of this stuff. And I'm
Yeah.
wondering, how do we make this breakthrough that has really transformed your life? When you think of transform, you think of trans, changing, and form, shape. And that's
Oh, I love
what
that.
happened in your life, certainly
Right.
from left brain analytical to now just very balanced. And so how do we get more people to be able to make this shift? What is some of the
I,
barriers that are
I
going
want
on?
to, what you do in your practice and what have you have dedicated your life to and helping people, reimagine and reframe their past
Mm,
experiences is basically, the seed of everything that you're talking about. It When we are children, we don't have the emotional or spiritual maturity or even the intellectual maturity to be able to make determinations about what is beneficial and what is harmful in our child experience. The only thing we can do is we can be within that and believe that that is the context of reality, what we are experiencing.
mm,
So the way to maneuver through it as a child when things are untenable is that we develop defense mechanisms, right? And the overriding defense mechanism is to select an identity for ourselves that we project forward that seems to create a lane where we can navigate through these challenges and get to the freedom of adulthood, possibly.
mm,
The thing about it is selecting an identity, it's a false narrative of who we really are. And it's based on what was told to us and what was not told to us and what was modeled and not modeled to us. So we're projecting things that have been given to us by other people and not selected by ourselves. It's not a sense of who we are. But
mm,
amazingly is that when we get into adulthood and we're carrying this pain and this selected identity is we are fiercely going to defend that selected identity. It's the reason for this massive polarization in American politics right now is because there's a group of people that their selected identity is this because of family conversation around the dinner table and this is right and this is wrong, this is what it means to be a man, and this is so
mm,
on and so forth. And then when you need to feel like you are worthy, you will go to any lengths to push out contrary information to what your version of your selected identity is because you're associating that with your worth. In your family, you were valuable because you had this identity. Okay. So what it is, it's about helping people to recognize that this projection of who we think we are when we come into adulthood is false. And to spend time getting to know ourselves and what intrigues us, what is our interest, what is our curiosity, what
mm,
is our drivers, what makes us tick, what is alluring to us. And all of these things usually have been cut off in childhood because we don't value them, even in public education, right?
mm,
So when we get aligned with knowing that we can have fun and play and we can have things that are interesting to us and intriguing and we can follow them and do them, then we get to find out who we are, which is oftentimes dramatically different than what we were projecting we were. So
huh,
you let go of the need to hold on to this, right? And that's what it's like. And we can only invite people. We can't force people into this realization of their own being. And like I said, it comes from that when if you're at a level 50 pain, then when you get to a level 100 pain, you're like, I can't do this anymore. And that's
mm.
when you start to break out of this little circle that you made for yourself and perhaps find another way.
Or what we call kind of like those shakeup periods of our life, whether that be
Yeah.
that 9/11 experience or my NDE. It's just
Yes,
the
exactly.
foundation that you're on, something just kind of happens and you can't go on the way that you
Yes,
were before. It will not work. And you brought up a
yes,
lot of great points where it seems like our childhood is about defeating the child, you know, maturing, not being a kid anymore. Every year we're supposed to not be further away from that kid.
yeah,
And when I connect to my own spiritual practice, whether I meditate, really it's through joy, it's through laughter, it's through play. And
Yes.
so there's a lot of cultural myths that we inherit, but really, I think a lot of the world would be healed if we really nurtured that inner child, allowed that to come forward instead of trying to defeat that or
Yeah.
suppress, repress it, not run away from it, but run towards it, embrace
Yes.
it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've had more clients than I can even count over the years that they might have gotten a homework assignment from a guide that's something like just play for 30 minutes 3 times over the next month
Mhm.
before we talk again. And then sometimes I'll get like an email on day 27 or 28, and the email is heart wrenching. It's like, I tried and I tried and I tried and I can't do it. Can you help me? And then you realize like how vastly they were indoctrinated into the belief that a to-do list or the idea of achievement is more important than love and joy and happiness and freedom and creating. And so we just go really slow, even if it's that they hold a piece of silly putty while they're on the phone with someone, and we just go very, very slow until they can see, wow, not the world didn't fall apart because I was playing with silly putty,
Yeah.
right?
Oh yeah, it reminds me of one of my all-time favorite movies with Tom Hanks and Elizabeth Perkins called Big. Where
Oh
Tom
yeah.
Hanks is just that little
Yes.
boy, and then all of a sudden he goes to the Zoltar machine, and then just becomes an adult. But then you're just seeing how people are just not like, what's with this guy? He's happy, he's joyful, he's playing
Yes.
around, and and so
And
it's
then
like
they jump on the trampoline with him.
yeah, and
Yep.
then I saw Elizabeth Perkins, who's in the movie, and she made like, some speech where she got some reward, but she discussed how that movie is really about not forgetting your inner child and how to have fun, how to have play. And at some point we lose that. And
Yes.
it seemed like that happened to you like around the 9/11 time where you gained this part of you, this flowing part, this joyful part. It's not so dense and serious part that might have been in the corporate world or whatever, it just had to
Right.
have fun. And it's okay to do differently than we were told, you know?
Yes. I also think that people think that when a child is in free imaginative play, that they're not going to outgrow. It's just because they're immature, and eventually it'll come
Mhm.
to an end. But what a child is doing in free imaginative play is they are practicing for creating adult reality, because it's important to start with a vision or an idea or a playfulness and being able to imagine things in order to create it. And so when a child lives in a traumatic environment and there's insecurity of being able to stay in that free and free imaginative play
Mhm.
state, then they lose the connection to be able to create and manifest a reality that makes them happy when they're adults. And that's like the primary reason why it's really important to sew back playing as a tool. And it feels good. It feels great.
Mhm. Yeah. In a world that falls in love with regurgitation, it's okay to have play and imagination,
Yes.
creativity. From day one, we're taught in the schools to memorize all this stuff, and it's very much a regurgitated lifestyle. So it's no wonder why, in many ways, we've reenacted the same, on extremes, the same stuff for 3,000 years. And yet, the vast majority of us has really had that checklist and have tried to check off every box and recognize, geez, that does not work.
Yeah.
And so it seems like this
Good
big
point.
question, this
Yep.
question, what does it take for it to work? Really, a lot of it is trying things a different way. Our solutions can't come from the same source of the problem. So,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
And every seminar I do, every multi-day seminar at least, I there's always some kind of a creative activity in there that might take an hour or 2 hours. And oftentimes I'll have someone come to it, maybe a doctor or an accountant or a lawyer. I can't do this. Can I sit this one out? Or they'll pull me aside in the beginning and tell me that this creates fear in them, or they just don't want to do it. But what's inevitable is 100% of the time, even those who believed that they couldn't get involved in it and do it and get a positive experience from it, wind up doing it and getting a positive experience from it and loving it. So
Mhm.
it's a matter of, the baby steps that we take to have someone, oh, well, just put these two together. That's all there is to it. And
Mhm.
letting go of the attachment of it having to succeed as something that's going to go on the refrigerator of somebody's house.
Well,
But then
yeah.
they can see that it's fun. It's actually fun to create and to use your imagination. But it's always connected to a realization about whatever the topic was for those 3 or 4 days. So they have this takeaway then that's a physical reminder of the energy and the shift and the doors that they walk through, so that they're not relying on their mind to put it up. They have a physical representation to bring back those really positive, joyful feelings.
I love that. And I think that's why a lot of people gravitate to you because we're supposed to be creative. And yet, within this sphere that we've created, there's a lot of regurgitation and some of the steps that it takes, whether that through chants or, all these other like crystals and all these things are very valid. But it seems
Right.
like you find a lot more practical ways for people to just connect to their own creative senses where it doesn't have to be so woo-woo or esoteric or mystical or out there. It could be like going back to your kindergarten classroom where most of
Yes.
us were probably more intuitive back then because we're
Oh, for
coming from
sure.
the other side. So I love it. I really do. And I love how, you practice what you preach, where you don't follow a path or a guru or teacher. You just kind of like, right, this will work and this is what's calling to me. I don't care, what the community thinks of it. This really is something that I'm called to do and I'm going to
Yes.
stick with it. It's
Yeah.
unique.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I've always appreciated about you since I met you too, that there was definitely a path that was pulling you,
Mm.
and yet even though, step by step, you break away with what the expectation of you was from others and create the thing that was liberating to you and felt like that was definitely your path. It's virtually unstoppable for you now. Whatever you do with it is up to you, but there's no demand, there's no have to. But what you do is you keep making the contribution that's aligned with what you feel and what you value.
Yeah. I think anything in life is successful when it comes out of a place of purity of service and desire. Not that I have to, but I want to do this. This is coming
Yes,
from
want
my
to.
innermost part of my being, not, because it's like a check off list or to make someone happy. It's just out of a deep inner calling.
Yes.
That's how more people succeed. I know you do a lot of intuitive work, and I've had, session with you that just blew me away.
Uh-huh.
But I'm wondering because it seems like intuition is a funny word because when I look at people like you or other, teachers that I, just see a lot in, it seems like intuition isn't just micro. There's also, a collective component to it. Because when I see people saying I'm intuitives, I'm like, well, I mean, that just for most people thinks that you could reach people on a psychic level. But to me, intuition goes far beyond that. It could also mean someone who just connects to this wisdom or this guidance in our life. So could you speak to how you define intuition and what maybe how other people could connect to it, how it could help them beyond just going on some psychic advisory website and giving readings like some people see intuition as? Like how
Right,
could
right,
intuition,
and that's something that I
navigate our lives?
stay
Yeah.
connected to, is to help people, discover and attune to their own intuition. So it's not about creating dependency on me by any means, but it's
Mm.
about finding the resource within them to be their own experts and their own guides. It doesn't mean that they want to eliminate all outside sources, but that the trust with themselves is paramount, so they can even make assessments as to what it is they are hearing from others. As a matter of fact, today is on the second Monday of every month. I do an online intuition development class just for that purpose, so that people can come together and we do exercises and we share. But what I see intuition as is it's a pretty broad way of saying my connection to collective consciousness, and collective consciousness is even your eternal
Mm.
consciousness. So it's a conduit to all that is. It really is basically our true life force. So intuition is far more valuable than we think it is. And what's really interesting is if you look around, a lot of other languages other than like American English, they have many words to describe intuitive focuses and experiences. Because the United States tends to be so enamored with the intellect, we lack spiritual words.
Mm.
So they go flat and they're misrepresented, or they become stagnant, or they just become meaningless, right? So that's one of the hardest things to do is like, how do I describe what I do? I'm an intuitive. It means nothing to anybody at all.
Right, you would think, like, the, creators of the English language would be more on our side and have more of a vernacular for the stuff, but you look
Yeah.
at the French language, how many words do they have for the clairs, you know? It's like clair
Yes.
sentience,
Right.
clair audient, clair this, clair that.
Yes. Yes.
So,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Clair
Exactly.
de lune for all I know, you know, it's like
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, so I always joke. I call myself a vocabularian. It's a word I made up to say I'm allowed to make up new words, and I make up new words every time I
yeah,
realize there's a big lack missing,
right.
something missing. But so I even use the term conduit to universal wisdom or conduit
Mhm,
to universal knowledge as the way I describe what I do because it helps people to understand it a little bit better. But like you said, it's through the use of all of our senses. Whatever's working for us. It could be dream reality and interpreting it. It could be seeing signs, synchronicity, coincidence. It could be being, tactily drawn or getting messages through our senses of the physical, through feelings of anything, a wash of love or good feelings, or feeling like a touch on the head. So it could be tactile, it could be visual, it could be auditory, it could be anything. And those are our connections to the non-physical, to information that oftentimes when we learn how to discern it is more valuable than oftentimes what we hear from humans or experts.
mhm,
Definitely.
mhm. Yeah, it's we weren't taught that. We were taught everything is outside of ourselves, and I think what you're saying is to trust yourself, stop
Yes.
abandoning it,
Yes.
and really
Yes.
trust that
Yes.
you're guided. There are nudges. There's a path, but you just have to tune in and listen. You know, it's a
Yeah.
beautiful way to live. Getting out of your own way. My
Mhm.
last question for you is: I know a lot of my viewers are here really to kind of make more sense out of their lives, but also understand the afterlife. And I always say that this life that we live, influences, the afterlife. That sometimes we just hold our breath to let it go when we die. But I think it's important to find, what we're looking for in this moment. We don't have
Right.
to wait for it. But I'm wondering for you, like, what are your kind of viewpoints, or what do your guides rather say about the hereafter, and how could we apply some of that for the here now?
My experience is that with my seemingly unlimited ability to let my consciousness travel. I describe it as, basically the way we often hear a person who's, had an NDA experience the level of consciousness, the joy and the light and the love and the unconditional support and no limitations feelings. But when you have a near death, you go back home to a certain degree, but then you have snapback. So from one NDE to another, we don't know how far along that trajectory they went before they snapped back. So I feel like some people's versions are incomplete. So there's still some ego in there. There's still
Mhm,
some trajectory of their own idea of religious
mhm,
symbols and so on. But when you really go all the way back to original consciousness that you had before you were born, there are no limitations. There is no religion. There's nothing negative whatsoever.
mhm,
There's only peace, joy, expansion, creativity, limitlessness, passion, and so on. But the one thing that you're driving at here is that this life that we have, whatever it is, or wherever we think we're in it, is an important component of our growth as a soul to remember that we are love, to remember exactly how unlimited we are as souls. So you never want to like truncate this version of your reality because it's
mhm,
miraculous. Even if you're having a rotten day or a rotten year, it's still pretty miraculous when you think of the trillions of cells in your body and you think
mhm,
about all the experiences you've had and all the love that surrounds you and all the infinite things there are to do on this planet. It's a miracle. So let's keep like moving along and getting closer to finding joy in our lives. Like, don't truncate this experience by any means, because what you discover here in your human form when you take it back with you to soul consciousness, it's with you permanently. We're
Mm,
still going to get the wisdom that we leave on the earth floor when we die, but it doesn't become us. To me, it's a difference between visiting a place and reading a story about a place, right?
mm,
No matter what happens, when you get there, it's not like what you read, and it's real and it's tactile and it's full and it's rich. And
mm.
it's the same thing about experiencing our enlightenment and making our discoveries here on this side of life.
Hmm. In a very trendy world, don't go on to the next thing, the next thing. Just be in your own life, be in the
Yeah.
present,
Yes.
and yeah, our world, we're on our phones. It's all about the next, the next, the next. And where is life? Where is the moment? It escapes so many of us. So I loved every word that you just said, where it's really about right here, right now in front of us, because this window, this just passed, that just, so
Yes.
you have to be here. And the
Yeah.
world is a beautiful place. So,
I
you
agree.
know, um, Chuck D from Public Enemy was a fellow Adelphi graduate, and he had a song called "Don't Believe the Hype" from Public Enemy. And
Ah,
so, what it seems like what you're saying right now is, yes, there's a lot of hype that's nothing new with everything going on, and it really it's to kind of focus on your own channel. That there is still good news, there's still beauty. You
yes.
just have to tune into it, and we
Yes.
are at large much better than this. We are much broader than just a small version that's portrayed at this time.
Definitely. Yeah. Well said.
Yeah. Well, Karen, you offered a lot. I'm wondering if there's any other, last bits of guided information that we didn't venture into. Obviously, we'd love to have you come back. It's hard to fill a full session with full time with everything you have to offer, as we'd be here from now to infinity. But I'm wondering that, as well as for my viewers who do want to become a part of the community that you have to author and offer too, because I know you
Yeah.
have a multitude of books. So, what's the best way to find you and your individual services or
Um,
classes as well as books too?
yeah, KarenGarvey.com is my website. I'm most active as far as being in touch with community through Facebook. That is the platform that I use primarily. So I have a couple of pages there where people are interactive with. I don't hesitate to let people, friend me at Karen L. Garvey, because I do put up a daily post there that seems over time and over years to be really helpful for people. And they appreciate that. And then I have a program called Happy in 90, the number 90,
Mm,
which is just basically everything that I did to go from being primarily unhappy to being primarily happy in a 90-day program where a new exercise or a thought opens up every day. And you can check that out too at happyin90.com.
yes, as well as your many books that you have. I think
Yes,
those
and that's
would be
all on
great.
my website,
That's
books
all
and
there too.
lots of essays on there. And I always have my current events and where I'll be and where you can find me on my website.
Mm, well, so the keys to happiness are not in someone else's hands. You have it.
Ah,
You have
right.
it. You're the owner of it. You're not leasing it, you own it. So, well, Karen, I know I certainly admire you and what you're about, and I encourage my viewers to check out your website as well as your Facebook page, because there's a saying that I have that one of my friends, George Mumford, says, which is to be able to generate the hope and the faith past the pain. And I know for you, each and every day, I think it's a couple times a day on this Facebook group that you have, you choose the channel that you want to tune into, and you choose faith, hope, and more
Yes,
importantly, this connection to this inner knowing.
yes.
And it always just radiates my day, and I'm sure so many others who tune into it. So I strongly suggest viewers to tune into your Facebook pages. It's a wonderful group, and just exactly what this time needs. It speaks to every moment that we're going through.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Karen Garvey, thank you for coming on my channel. You're welcome back anytime. Let's stay in touch, and
All
thank you
right.
for your
Sounds
generous
good.
time.
Sounds great. I look forward to talking to you again.
Well, that was a wonderful, impactful conversation with Karen Garvey. I know you're going to take so much wisdom from Karen and a lot of her transformation that she shared today during our conversation, and it could help to move the needle of your life to elevation, progress, and evolution in your everyday life with everything going on. So thank you, Karen, for her generous time, and make sure you check out her channels and books as well. And for those of you who are new to my channel, thank you for watching this interview. Please make sure to subscribe, comment, like, and share this conversation with Karen Garvey on the Wisdom Jacobs Ladder. But thank you all for tuning in. I wish you all a wonderful upcoming holiday, and we'll see you next time on the Wisdom Jacobs Ladder.